So what inning are we in? I was listening. This is kind of fun. This is very spontaneous.
Well, do you remember the very first time we talked?
I do.
You caught me off guard because you actually had legitimate financial questions, unlike most people who were calling me at, I think it was about 2013.
Yep.
And most people who called me with a financial background were actually looking for insider information.
Well, that's rampant in Canada, so they were Canadians. And
yeah, and I was like, wait a second, you're actually building a model or something, aren't you? Yeah, I'm building a model. So tell me more.
It's been great since then. We spent Mother's Day together.
Yeah, so just, that probably needs some explaining.
It's all right. It's been Thanksgiving with Kevin Murphy, Mother's Day with your family.
So Mother's Day is one of those holidays that's very difficult to track, right? It moves around in my mind, and so it just sort of randomly shows up. So when Alan said, on that Sunday, will you take me to your facility in Smiths Falls and give me a tour? I'm like, that sounds awesome. I'd love to do it. Come on by. And he shows up with the plant, which was really nice because that confirmed to me that I think I'd forgot it was Mother's Day. And so I'm not sure if I actually said the plant was from you.
No.
But But it was. I remember too. It was a very hot day.
Yep.
And I was trying to throw him off because he's from Texas, right? And I'm in Ottawa, Canada. And what I'd done is, I'm not very mechanical, but I'm curious. So I had an old snowmobile, and I parked it where I would normally park my car in my garage. And I thought, there's stuff leaking out of it, I don't know what, so I'll just take the entire thing apart. And so Alan arrives, and when's Mother's Day? May?
In May.
And it was a hot day in May.
Second Sunday, May.
And I'm working on the snowmobile, and I said, listen, I'm working on this because like in another month, I think it's going to snow, and I got to have it ready. And I think you briefly believed me.
No. Well, I'm glad you're sitting down. Bruce, I can tell he's pacing whenever we're talking. We have him sitting down, but one of the first things you did when you left, you actually shared some stock picks, and I know one was organogram.
Yeah.
But you're in a position now where you can really speak freely. You just kind of said it, and I want to switch it to the United States.
Well, as long as I don't use any disparaging words.
Okay.
But I never
About
would.
anybody or just former employers?
I don't know where the boundary is, but it's just a generally good rule.
Well,
you should probably not use disparaging words generally.
You've had over 100 days now to, I know you were always interested in the United States, but you wanted to get in there the right way. Maybe this is the right way now, and you've started to get involved. But for our investors in the crowd, what do you see as the biggest opportunities in the United States? How are people going to create value?
So the filter I applied, I went to a lot of people's spots and shops, and for the ones that I didn't participate with, it wasn't necessarily specifically what they were doing. But as I got through it, I kept looking at saying, are all the big guys in that state already? That makes it a little bit tougher. Do they have a very difficult to comprehend supply chain, i.e. California? That's kind of harder. Do I like the consumption model in the state? Like, is this a pious state or is it a party state? Okay.
Which one's better?
Well, I think party state because if you're willing to accept it on any level, if there's a medicinal application, it's easier to back into that. So it's a much shorter argument in the party state. So I think a place like Michigan. And then I started looking at, if you scale, how big can the business be? And so what captivated me, I kept coming back to Michigan. And people are like, why? I'm like, I don't know. Everything I look at, I keep checking boxes that say high consumption state, pretty well regulated, two-tier coming, has had a history with the medical difficult, challenging system. And so in that particular case, that's why I wanted to do something in Michigan. Then I wanted to do something with Gage because I thought they were really good, because I wanted to understand, what does it look like to have 40% market share in a state? What's it look like to actually own a state and a well-structured supply chain? And if you can go from that strength, you can go to another strength. And so I actually wanted to be involved in one that was going to have strength to strength, not width and hope to get caught into something, as an example. And we'll see. I think, how fast things roll out and how well they roll out is yet to be determined. But I really, I found it hard if I started going west of the Mississippi to find things that I was as motivated by as east. And I was in Massachusetts. I don't know, who was it? Kev this morning said, it's like watching a train wreck. Like it's just unbelievable to me. And you've got really powerful people trying to push this to happen. And
NIMBY, a lot of NIMBY.
Yeah, man. Like people are complaining because people are lining up and taking a pee on their lawn because the lineup's too long. I'm like, well, the solution is don't be such a jerk. Invite them into your house. Like, let them use your bathroom and they won't pee on your lawn. Like, it's not that hard. I was a student. I understand that equation. But like, it's just very, very negative. And when I see California, where some of the jurisdictions are now starting to get really negative on dispensaries in their own area, great for delivery, but I just, like, your California and our British Columbia are identical, right? Like, when I started Canopy Tweed, if we got an order from British Columbia, I was like, do these people not know their neighbors? Like, everyone has weed in British Columbia. You need not have it come across the whole country to get to you. It's impossible for me to believe at that time. Like, I tried raising money in British Columbia, and I went to a thing called Tiger 21, which are the more sophisticated, quite wealthy people. I did my presentation, and I got zero money. Every one of them was sure that it was, are you sure it's not illegal? It's not legal. And you know, even the one guy, and I've said this before on stage, the one guy said to me, he goes, so what you're telling me is that the bag of marijuana my son has in the basement, he bought illegally. I'm like, that is what I'm telling you, and you should talk to your son more. Like, it's just like, I'm not gonna get a check from you. This is a zero chance check. But like, I just couldn't get too excited about those corridors because it's so complicated.
So this year, there have been a lot of shocks. I think the biggest shock was either you leaving, but maybe CanTrust. And if you have the vantage that
I like being in that conversation.
Yeah. So, well, CanTrust came...
so just in case you're not from Canada, CanTrust almost nailed their name because you cannot trust them.
So what's going to happen there, and how's that impact the industry? You know, what's the long-term ramifications?
It's super bad, right? So they were positioned as a former pharmaceutical sales company that had created a lot of trade. They'd supplied pharmacies and really been in that business, and were quite, they're older guys, and everybody thought, well, they're adults. And they were doing a really good job on their products and their oils. They had a great market share of medical. And so a bunch of folks who were entering the space as institutions thought, well, I'll buy Canopy and I'll buy that one. Mm-hmm. And when they went out to do a road show, they weren't taken around by, you know, Larry Curly and Mo. They were taken around by Bank of America. And so when that implodes, the shrapnel gets a lot of us. Like, imagine now you're a portfolio manager at a decent firm, and you say, I want to put some money to work. The investment committee is going to ask you a question. How do you know they're not like CanTrust? Mm-hmm. Well, you're already a cannabis company. You're already a new play. You're always trying to do this stuff. I think investment committees probably haven't had a new names review in quite a long time at a lot of the major institutions. And we were starting to see institutional investors come into the Canadian market. So I think that probably stopped it completely. And I think retail shareholders have been buying it all the way down.
Yeah. So, but what happens to CanTrust now? You have experience with Health Canada. Did they just let it bleed away, or?
Bureaucrats, one thing is beautiful about the world, bureaucrats are identical and symmetrical in every jurisdiction, right? Their objective is, don't embarrass me, I'm not here for the humongous paycheck, I'm here for the job certainty and the quality of life. And so what should have happened with that one is, they should have said, we are screwed. We've screwed ourselves. Now, what are we going to do about it? They should have vended into a trusted party who could go to the regulators and say, I'm going to fire anybody who makes 50 grand or more. I'm going to replace everybody, and I'm going to be the new sheriff. That site will be mine, and I'll do that if you agree not to take all our licenses away forever. You can take them for 3 months. Don't make us throw our product out if it meets spec, and we'll go to the penalty box rather than the prison. Mm-hmm. If that would have been done, it probably would have preserved $3 to $4 per share of shareholder value and gotten rid of the problem. That would have been just right. Mm-hmm. But that didn't happen, despite I think I called at least 7 or 8 companies pushing, this would be a really good idea, you should do that. Because it would, and you get a fire sale, right? You would have got this thing cheap. Instead now, it's like you're asking the regulators, nothing's really totally changed, it's still the same company. So now if you're a regulator, a bureaucrat, that's like going to a place that had like a triple murder and saying, I'm a realtor, it's very nice, you'll like it here. Like, it's a disaster scene for the regulators. So do you really, really have an enthusiasm to reinstate the licensing at a triple murder site? Like, I think, you know what I mean? Like, buy some matches.
So let me change it back to the United States. So
Just saying.
canned trust is toast. I get that.
Yeah.
Back to the United States. Since you can't say disparaging remarks, who has impressed you among the public companies? You gave some public companies in Canada.
Yeah.
Have any impressed you with the way they're going?
So obviously I loved Acreage. Like we did
Right.
that deal because I could see where they're going and what we could do with the transfer technologies down and in. But what I look now at is I'm going to try and look up that ratio you talked about this morning, because when I'm looking at it, I'm trying to figure out who still has wiggle room on their balance sheet, who has some options to play, who's across enough states that are getting exciting rather than overly excited about, right? Like if your whole story was Massachusetts, it's a hard story to get people. So I looked at that. Obviously, I've covered on Gauge. My MSO thing, I will expect that as early as next Wednesday to announce that. And it's been the reason I've been slow on it is partially me, but partially.
Is that a public company? I haven't kept up with it.
I believe it is a public company, yes.
Okay.
Yes. And I won't be able to mention the name quite yet, but
Right.
when I've looked around, I do like the ones that at least have one state where they're singularly dominant. And I do really like to think about how can you take those lessons learned and go elsewhere. I've been very impressed with the people who've actually rolled out. One of the things we did to test products so that we could actually make our report to the FDA. Remember when we had that CBD hemp panel at the FDA, what was that, about 3 months ago? One of the things we prepared was we tested every CBD product we could pull off the shelf anywhere. And like 80% were more than 10% out of spec on what was in it. So, and it wasn't just the direction you think, right? Like it's not somebody saying, well, I told you there's 50 milligrams and I put 5 in. Oh, that happened. But there was also ones that said 50 and I had 300. And so what I've been impressed with is organizations which are doing sort of what I would call a more QA, QC reporting and showing that, because it comes back to retail investors, retail buyers. They want trust.
So we've had a lot of M&A here. You did a lot of M&A.
31 transactions.
Things
Yes.
have changed. We had one deal that was announced in October, finalized in December, just break up kind of suddenly. If you were the CEO of some of these companies sitting here with these big transactions and you see the way the market is, would you walk away from a deal? Had you ever thought about walking away from a deal?
No, I tried never even to retrade somebody. So if it's a stock swap, you didn't really pay more. Like, so I don't, like if you've done an equity transaction and the proportionality you were satisfied with before, if everybody's fallen the same, you still already have your exchange ratio. So like the only reason you walk away is if you did a shit deal and you realized like 4 months later and then you blame it on HSR. I think, because I'm giving you this much of my company, we've agreed. So I don't know that, I think what happens with sometimes these extended pause is M&A is a good idea that doesn't always work out. If you have a lot of time to think about it, you know what I mean? That can kind of eat on you. So I look at these, I think it's a great idea. Was it $90 million the HSR threshold? I would think that there's probably a whole bunch of smaller transactions that can get momentum. And if I had a small company, I'd be pitching that I'm under HSR, I want to integrate, I'm going to give you this, doing 8% more market share in this space. I'm surprised we're not just seeing constant snap up of all the small stuff.
And it's harder for them to access capital now.
Yeah, and like if you did that and you got momentum, essentially if you bought up things which were accretive and smaller and put this amalgam together, you crush the opportunity for the people who want a loan to own. Because you got yourself out of the loan receiving business and you actually became part of something bigger. And then when you're part of something bigger, the access to the capital markets does improve. And so like I would expect to see a constant rhythm of under 90 mil transactions so they don't have to go to HSR, or you can do it like where you might sell an option to buy it, structure a deal to stay under HSR. Like Kevin and I had a great time structuring our deal so that everything was fully compliant. Even though it wasn't the intention of the rules, it was in compliance with the rules. Like I'm almost positive the people at the New York Stock Exchange did not expect us to give money to the shareholders of an MSO, but not to the company.
So let me ask you the hard question, and you can't disparage, so I know it's going to change your answer. How are you going to compete against Canopy and Acreage? With your new MSO.
Yeah, no, I think at the end of the day, they are going to be very strong and dominant, but I don't think they're going to be the singular entity. And so
no, but what's it take to succeed?
Well,
so
part of it, what it is, it's like when I started up Tweed. There was a single supplier in Canada that supplied the government of Canada with a very narrow product set. And in all the pictures they had on the web, they always had people in white lab coats. And their name started with Can, as you recall. And so when I started the company, I said, everybody's got to wear black t-shirts because we're going to leave like the white lab coat space to the incumbent. And we're going to have a name that doesn't have Can in it. We're going to try and like I called their helpline a lot of times, just asking questions about everything I could think of because I wanted to know what their answers were. And so I played away from them until we got momentum. And I think with the MSO, what I'm looking at is a way to play away, get some real momentum, get some real cash leverage, and then come back into the bigger game because you don't want to just go running head on to something. So to create value, I think you have to actually use some science.
And we have like 20 seconds. I want to ask you just to extend. Some of the MSOs are in Canada and pursuing international markets.
They
You've
should.
always been big on international. Is that?
If I was running a decent-sized MSO and there was a big fire sale on Canadian assets that would get me international access, I would be looking at a deal like that.
I can't get people to listen to me. You and I agree on that.
Well, it's because, you know what? We got 1 second. Go to Germany, go to the doctor. The doctor says you shouldn't have opioids, you should have cannabinoids. Go to the pharmacy, 85% of the time the government pays for your product. So essentially it's a system by which the cost of it is indifferent between opioids and cannabis. And if you happen to like cannabis and get a doctor to prescribe it to you, you also get that where they just paid for your weed. If you don't think that can catch on, pay attention. So like it's one of those things where you got to look at the model and the payee, not just the jurisdictional governance, because there are all kinds of things happening that people just pass by and say, oh, it's too hard in Brazil. I don't like, Germany's got a lot of rules.
Okay, well, I think we're done. I look forward to your big announcement as soon as Wednesday.
Well, thank you guys.